Hey, this is Eric Kluber of Void Vader, and you're experiencing Poppitt's Corner.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome, episode 112 of Poppitt's Corner, and I'd like to bring on the first lady of the show, as you were my first female guest on, and I would like to please bring on again the wonderful Miss Jen Warren. How are you doing today?
I am honored. I am fine. Thank you so much for having me. I'll get nice and close to the microphone.
Absolutely.
I'm not shy at all.
Well, you were in the neighborhood, so that I appreciate you stopping by and hanging. So
We were. Thank you so much. Yes, on this nice summer warm day.
right.
Yes.
So I'm pretty much going to go through your entire career and hopefully talk some shop and tell some stories. So if you're ready, I'd love to get started.
Damn, bring it on. Yes,
All right.
sir.
So, how I'd like to begin these specific episodes is just ask you your first kind of recollection of hearing music and what was the band?
Okay. Great question. So with metal, for me, it was Iron Maiden changed everything for me, but that wasn't the first band I ever heard. So I'm the oldest of 6 children. I didn't have any older siblings to kind of guide my way through it. And my parents were really horrified by the thought of me listening to metal or anything with a scary monster on the cover, you know. And because my parents are musicians, but hey, those guitar players are playing the electric guitar so close to their crotch. How can this be good? Because they sang in a mega church for 14 years, and I'm grateful because I got a free music education out of that, and I'm very blessed that I went to a high school with an award-winning concert choir program. So every year I was in a choir 5 days a week, and then my senior year I had 3 hours of choir 5 days a week, and it really helped my ear training and listening to blending and harmonizing, and it's really come to help me now with songwriting, especially when I'm given guitar parts by our guitarist Scott, and now we have Tom with us in Subsurface Tension. And so I'll take that and work with it and come up with first like the root note of it, and then I'll come up with harmonies, and then I'll play with different rhythms and syncopated rhythms, and then I'll pull out the root note that I originally sang to try to come up with different melodic lines for it. But I'm getting off on a tangent here. I tend to do that. I end up in Ohio. You asked me a question.
It's all good. But even before this, because you mentioned your mom and dad were in choir, they were teachers of it, did you say?
So both of my parents are teachers. My mother's a microbiologist and works in a lab. She taught for a while, but her heart was really working in a hospital lab. And then my father, he's still a professor for computer science, and he's published over 24 books for computer programming. He wrote SQL for Dummies and Voodoo OS 2. I mean, a zillion other ones, but those are the ones I remember the most because he was working on those around the house. So he's still an online professor and teaches. He taught at Oregon State and even local here in Orange County. He used to teach at Golden West College back when they still lived down here. So, but my grandparents were teachers as well, science teacher, music teacher, and my grandmother taught me to play piano. Not great. I mean, she was a great teacher, but I was just too lazy. But she taught me violin when I was like 6 years old, and she taught voice. So it kind of comes in the family that way. But my parents, they just met at church because my grandmother was the music director at a Southern Baptist church in Illinois, right by University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. And so when my dad got his first engineering job in San Diego for an aerospace company, they just raised me through the church, and we went to a mega church in Orange County shaped like a star. And I got to be a flying angel there and learn how to to just sing and read music and blend. And it helps when your best friend is sitting next to you, who's like a year older and a way better musician than I was, and just listening to her like I'm her little shadow. And that helped me a great deal. But they sang in the TV choir for 14 years. And so I would be in the back of the rehearsals every Thursday night just listening for 4 hours, because the director back then was very strict and they couldn't leave until they got it right for the next Sunday. And so sometimes he would even keep them till midnight. And I would be like this 10-year-old girl sitting in the back and listening to like the 8-part harmonies over and over and over. They'd break it apart. And I just thought, I'm just sitting here. This is a part of my life. This is normal. But I didn't realize I was learning a great deal without even focusing, because I was just sitting back there hanging out for all those years.
Now, I want to go back real quick to your grandma in specifically, and you know, how much of, I guess, an influence was she on you, like even just showing you new music? And was it contemporary bands at the time, or was it kind of like, you know, like, I don't know, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, or because you said your first instrument was piano?
Yes.
Okay, and at around what, 5, 6 or whatever. And so I'm just kind of curious what she showed you at first to even getting you on the piano bench.
All classical. She and my mother were into classical music, and it's just the basic piano book. And when I walked into our studio, Freddie and his brother Phil own a studio. Freddie's the bass player for Subsurface Tension. I walked in, and they recently expanded, and on the piano right there in the front door is the book, and it's red. It's like landscape, and I forget what it's called, but it's like the classic book that's been around for decades. And I thought, oh, I remember that. And I'm opening it, playing. It was what was in that book, but around the house, my mother was always playing like Bach, Beethoven, Rachmaninoff, Chopin, things like that. And so that became the norm. But then she also would play like Christian contemporary gospel music. And so I would run around the house singing that stuff too. And it was just, it's a lot of memories that I don't think about day to day. But then sometimes I go, hey, I'm going to go find some of that old Christian gospel music from the 70s, like Andre Crouch and Danny Bell Hall. And I'll play it and go, damn, I remember there was so much feeling in this music and so much passion, and that I tried to bring out that kind of stage presence and passion into the metal, singing now and then singing with the Maidens, just running around and smiling. And because we were always told in the choirs at the megachurch, the Crystal Cathedral, now it's called Christ Cathedral, they went bankrupt and the Roman Catholic Church purchased it. We would show up for rehearsal on Thursdays, and then they'd say, okay, for Sunday morning for the television to be televised, we want 2 things, big hair and smiling faces. Well, we'd come and sing too and do our parts, but that was the most important thing for television. Big hair in the 80s. And we always had to smile no matter what, smiling like this. And sometimes I'll kid around and say, how come none of these death metal bands smile? I mean, I'm half kidding, but half serious, because I love opposites. And that's what was so great about the Maidens, or just doing like women in metal. I love opposites. I just think that it's very interesting. And so I smile a lot on stage as practice. Just I have a background in theater. My bachelor's degree is in theater, where you're supposed to smile the whole time. If you're not feeling it, you just turn on the smile. And then scientific studies have shown if you smile a lot, pretty soon you are feeling better. It's like your physiology just kind of grabs onto that, tells your brain, hey, you're happy. You know, they've even done studies and said, put a pencil in your mouth if you feel depressed. And after 20 minutes, the people tested that they were much happier.
Because they were, maybe because they were using some muscles that they weren't before, or whatever the case may be.
Like something in our DNA and our physiology. It's wild.
I always learn something new on the show. So so you mentioned violin as well. What were you attracted more towards the violin than, say, the piano? Was it just an easier transition for you to do? Because I know you mentioned you weren't into the piano, thing at first or whatever, but
the piano was way too disciplined for me. Although I love to go to it to try things out, but I wasn't allowed to go to it and just kind of completely right brain mess around like Tori Amos was allowed to do. Like she just went crazy. Her brother was taking the lessons, and once he was done, she went over to it and just created stuff, and it was amazing. For me, the violin was a lot more flashy and fun, and at the time, I didn't have a violin. It was only at my grandmother's house, so I was only able to play it there. But every time I went, I would pick it up and say, "Mom, take my picture playing the violin," and I would try to play, and so I did what I could with it. But we didn't have a violin in the house later until my oldest son was in school, and he studied it for about 3 years.
Okay, now what were some of the bands you were kind of getting into, I guess, kind of immediately after this and transitioning maybe into your teen years or going into middle school or?
Very good question. So I babysat a lot, being the oldest of 6 kids, and I would do chores around the house, and I'd mow the lawn and wash the cars and clean the house for an allowance. Like try diapering 3 babies for $1 an hour. That's brutal. But I love those babies so much. All my brothers and sisters, and now they're all grown up, and I'm so proud of them. But my babysitting money, my first albums I bought were Belly Squire, Cheap Trick, REO Speedwagon, Joan Jett, The Police. I got into them for a while, and then I gradually, once I heard I guess it was Motley Crue. They came out with the Shout at the Devil album, and it was very different. And all the kids at church were like really into it, like underground. And I thought, wow, that's a really different sound. Those guitars are distorted in a different way than like a Billy Squier album. So I explored that more. And then from there would get into the Scorpions and Def Leppard
And how are you hearing these bands, per se? Were you listening to the radio and then the bands would come on and say, oh, I like this song, so I'm going to go buy the album? Or was it your friends showing you or MTV? Or, I mean, how are you specifically discovering these bands?
I never thought of that way. So MTV introduced me into the rock stuff. I would get the Cheap Trick I got Foghat and Ted Nugent. And some of those I had to like get at the library or check out at the library if I didn't have enough money. But actually, now that I think back, it was the Crystal Cathedral Boy Choir boys who introduced me to like the Motley Crue, the Def Leppard, and I thought, this rocks. And then I would seek it out more on the radio and then buy the vinyl with my babysitting money and listen to that for a while. And you know what it's like when you can only afford a few, your parents don't want to buy these things for you. They bought me my stereo, but that was it. And you listen more and more. You just listen to that album over and over and over again. The days of vinyl where you lie down on the floor, you pull out the sheet, and you just reading the lyrics. And then when it's over, you listen to the whole thing in order. When it's over, you just start it all over again. And so you want to get more of that, but you don't know where to go. And until you start hanging out with kids at school and you see, oh, there's a Van Halen shirt. We had one kid in my school, La Quinta High School, who would go to Hollywood every weekend, and he would see these bands like Motley Crue and all those bands coming up at that time, and he would come back with the T-shirt. And it was cutting edge, and you go, oh, those are the cool bands to see, but I was a freshman. I wasn't allowed to go. And if I did want to see metal, I'd have to sneak out to go see like Judas Priest or Maiden or whatever.
And what about the heavy music kind of did it for you, especially around this time, because you were raised kind of, I don't know, conservatively in a religious household. So, I mean, what about the heavy music kind of did it for you at that specific age in your life?
Well, the big shift was with Motley Crue, with not only the look, because I love the dominatrix look. I wore things like that later, and I still do. And it was getting into, so there were different levels of depth. So the Motley Crue, Scorpions, loudness got me to Van Halen, got me to that next step until I discovered Iron Maiden. And then my mind was blown, because here was a singer who was classically trained, and the vocals were so melodic, and that blew my mind, because from the T-shirts I'd seen from school, I figured They were death metal, even though that wasn't even a term yet back in the early 80s. And I just remember thinking I thought the music would be a lot darker and more scary and maybe not as accessible to me, someone who's a 13, 14, 15-year-old dorky, skinny girl wearing glasses who's a babysitter and a wannabe singer. And I heard it on the KLOS Seventh Day show where they play the whole show. They play the whole album, and I taped it. My mind was blown, and I just listened to it every day.
And were you starting to notice your friends listening to this kind of same style of music, and that's kind of how you guys clicked? Or was it a thing where you were kind of like a loner and listening to this specific music and then venturing out to find others that kind of enjoyed the same kind of style?
That's a good question. I was a loner, but I did have a best friend in choir who was a boy, and he not only loved Maiden, but he also turned me on to Merciful Fate and King Diamond and like Twisted Sister and some of these other, and to Kiss. He was a huge Kiss fan, which a lot of girls may not get, but a lot of guys will collect a lot of Kiss memorabilia. And I've been around someone who had a lot of that. And as a marketer for my day job, it's brilliant. I've got to hand it to Gene Simmons for what he's done with his brand, their brand, for that. So, I'm sorry, what was your question?
No, I was just curious.
I'll end up in Ohio.
I was just curious if you were starting to kind of see other people getting into this kind of music and kind of having your own clique now, because obviously you mentioned you were kind of a loner, and I'm just kind of curious when that whole thing kind of started to shift for you and you finding friends and going to concerts with them and whatnot.
I had a few friends in the music department at my high school, but there were also cliques amongst the cliques at my high school. So being a woman who is really into metal was more rare.
Well, and this was like kind of hard rock at this specific time. It wasn't like full on metal. I mean, it was just kind of starting. So maybe into like the heavier style of music at this time, would you say? Right? Yes, no, maybe so, because it wasn't really metal. I mean, besides like Motley Crue and Maiden and when I was around that time, from talking with other people, it was more of like a hard rock kind of thing. Like the metal thing didn't come until like mid to late 80s.
Well, for me, in 83, I was a freshman in high school. I was 13 in 83, and that's when I started listening to the heavier stuff. I mean, Twisted Sister's metal, it's also kind of hair metal, but it's so fun. And just getting into that, I guess it was around, no, you're right. I don't think I got into Merciful Fate until I was about 17, 18, getting into King Diamond and Metallica and Megadeth. And it was about that year that I took our garage in Westminster and put quilts all over it and bought a PA. And I had 4 guitars at the time, influenced by Lita Ford. I had like 2 BC Rich guitars. And I got my parents okay to set it up as a little band room and was trying to recruit women to do an all-girl metal band. And it was that year, I guess in 88, when I was really getting into that harder stuff. So you're right. It's like a stair-stepping, starting as a tween, a preteen and a teen into the hard rock, into like the light, more hair metal, and then graduating into more serious musicianship, where it's like, hey, this is awesome. And then I would gravitate toward people who did like that type of genre, but also toward more musicians as well, where I would try to find young women who were in Orange County that I could try to put a band together with, back using the recycler well before Craigslist.
And now, was this a difficult task for you? Because, I mean, were there a lot of women musicians back in, the mid to late 80s, finding it around your high school?
They were very hard to find. I had one female bass player right around the corner, like 5 doors down, and that was really rare. And we tried putting something together, and I put ads out on the Recycler hard copy newspaper, and I got some responses, and I did meet some women through that in LA and Orange County. But I also got a lot of sickos contacting me, and the worst, well, there were 2 kinds. One would say, yeah, little lady, we've got a band for you. We need a guitar player. And at the time I had ads out I was looking for a band, but I was also looking for players as well. And back then I was a decent guitar player, not so much now because I don't practice every day for 2 hours a day like I did back then. Back then I was serious about my guitar. And so I had an ad out for vocalist or guitarist. And I get a call from a guy saying, yeah, little lady, go ahead, and what gear do you have? Oh, okay, you have a Marshall half stack and you got a PA. You got 4 guitars. Oh, and one's a Rickenbacker guitar? That's rare. Okay, go ahead and pack up all your gear. We're going to need you to bring all your gear to your audition. And yeah, it's going to be at night. And by the way, we live down a long, dark dirt road. So here are directions, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
There's nothing creepy about that phone call.
Not at all. So, yeah, I was prepped to do that and decided, you know what, I'm going to take my little brother to a drive-in movie instead on Beach Boulevard before they took it down. Because something doesn't seem right about this. But I had no older siblings to say, what, are you crazy? Of course not.
Or your parents didn't even say, what are you doing? You're crazy? Or just you just kind of snuck out of the house to do it?
Well, it would be like, well, I'm auditioning for a band. I had a car by then. And half the time they didn't know what I was doing. I went and got a tattoo underage, came home, and gave my father a heart attack. The poor man. He just saw that edge of Eddie peeking out of my shoulder and just started shaking, you know. But yeah, so we got that kind of sicko. And the other type would call up and pretend to be legit and just start talking through music, genres, gear, and then just come in with a really creepy, weird sexual question, like out of the blue, where you hear it and you're like, huh?
Caught off guard a little
bit. Like, oh, I get it. You're a dipshit. I get it.
Interesting. So it's why an all-girl band? What was the kind of the influence to do that?
That's a really good question. I didn't see all-girl bands except for the Go-Go's, and
Vixen was one, I think, and
right. And I didn't even get into Vixen. I got into Lita Ford. I was really into Joan Jett, and earlier when I was younger, when the Go-Go's came out, I was into them, and I thought, wow, an all-girl band that has a really different dynamic. That's especially on the album cover where they're all wearing towels and they all have their head in a towel.
Oh, it's the best album. That's the first album. Yeah, Beauty and the Beat.
Right. And I thought, this is so classy, and yet it's sexy. You've got these women in these white towels, but it's like they're doing a spa day. And it was that balance of sensuality and fun and sisterhood. And my female friends at the time who weren't into metal, they never were, they were into that. And that's something we could bond over. So I just thought, an all-girl band would be cool because I don't really see any all-girl rock bands except for the Go-Go's and Lita Ford. And she's got her kick-ass guys behind her. But I thought that would be cool and it'd be pushing the envelope. And I love opposites. Like, let's have a bunch of girls dressed in black leather and do a metal band. Just how fun. Right?
Sounds fun.
Yeah.
Were you finding a lot of bands were popping up around you during trying to form a band?
Mostly male.
Sure, but yeah,
friends of mine. I would try to gravitate toward people who played that I met either through church or through school or friends of friends, or maybe a couple people on the Recycler that did pan out, or to my local music shop where I was taking lessons and I put up a little flyer saying, let's get an all-girl band together, something like that.
Sure. So when was the moment where you actually, reached your goal and found, other female musicians, or did you never find female musicians to start a band with?
I found female musicians to attempt. And we would meet in my garage, and I would paint the backdrop, and I wrote 3 songs, and we would try to work on them, but it never panned out. I met some gals, and it was just too difficult at the time. I went to college, and I wavered between a degree in music or English or theater. I thought, well, maybe I could teach theater or music, and I ended up getting a degree in theater arts and going out and just working in the corporate world as in sales. Did that for a block of years and finally said, I'm going to put a band together. I met a guy at work, guitarist. I said, hey, let's put a band together. Let's figure out what we're going to do. I didn't know what a tribute band was. And I just did research on cover bands, found out what a tribute band was. And there was a band out of Chicago called Revelations. They were an Iron Maiden tribute band. And I thought, what a cool idea. Wow. Because Bruce Dickinson's voice was something I really aspired to. I identified with his voice more than anyone's. So I thought...
Why?
I think it might be because of his classical training, his vibrato, and I sang with vibrato. And it's funny, I worked really hard through the years to get a vibrato because when I started singing at the church, all the older girls who were better and good singers, they had it and I didn't. And so I'd sit next to them and listen to them and try to figure out how they did it because my grandmother, music teacher, always told me, you don't learn to do a vibrato. You either have it or you don't. But that wasn't true. And I realized it's something you can control a few different ways. So I picked that up and I noticed Bruce had it. And I don't even know if I noticed that consciously. I just loved his voice and the music they made. It was so melodic with the dual lead solos with Adrian and Dave. And they're just so adorable. I look back at old stuff of them and their spandex pants, like, damn, they're so freaking adorable.
Interesting. So was this the first band that you were actually in, was Revelations, or did you do an original prior to this?
I did a cover band, an Iron Maiden tribute band called Wrathchild. So that was my first official band where we had gigs. So the band I did in high school, we called it Dead Bride, and we never did a gig. We just played in my garage. But it was a good learning experience, and it taught me a lot. And with Wrathchild, we were mixed gender, 3 males, 2 females. And it was super fun. We got our feet wet with playing live and gigging and dealing with each other and gear. And then after one show, one of the guys was joking around. It was at the Gas Lamp in Long Beach. He said, you know what? It was James Moore. He played in Creeping Death, the Metallica tribute band, about the same time. We recruited him from there. He said, you know what? You guys should just fire the 3 of us guys and replace us with girls and be an all-girl Maiden tribute band. He said, that would be so cool. And so the other 2 guys were like, wait a minute. Well, I don't know about this. And Melanie Cisneros, our bass player, and she plays in tons of bands now and has over the years, she said, yeah, that'd be a cool idea. I'm open to it if you guys are happy with it, you know. And so then we said, okay, we'll look into that.
Now, where is this gap? And where I'm coming with this is, I mean, Creeping Death is like, what, 2000s or the 10s or something? I mean, are you going...
1999, yeah.
Oh, so you're jumping like 10 years after from obviously trying to find the all-girl band in the 80s. And then, so what happens in between there? And I guess let's go back even before that. And you mentioned vocals and guitar. So I'm just kind of curious, what about those made you gravitate towards them instead of wanting to be a bass player or drummer or, I don't know, continuing with the violin or playing piano or...
The guitar was just the official kick-ass instrument. So when I saw Joan Jett with her guitar and Lita Ford with her guitar, that was it. I had posters of them in my room, on my wall, Joan Jett jumping on a trampoline. The trampoline was off camera. You didn't see that. With the yellow background, she's jumping with her Gibson. And I thought, that is just so fucking badass. That just spoke to me. And I said, I want to do that. And so for a while, I thought, singing. I go, singing, anybody can sing. I want to focus on guitar. Because I really thought anybody could sing because I'd been singing in choirs from such a young age. I thought that was the lazy instrument. And I still thought that later, singing through the Maidens. I thought, oh, I'm not that good. Anybody can do this. I'm just the singer. I'm not one of these virtuosos that I'm playing with, these amazing women. And it's just funny because I told that to Linda McDonald, the drummer, years later, and she kind of looked at me like, what the hell? What the hell? Like, but it's something in the back of my mind. Like, my bucket list is still to sing and play at the same time. And I even tried doing that with Subsurface in between guitar players.
Oh, I could see you doing that. That would make a lot of sense too, though. But then you'd have to figure out a way to kind of own the stage while having a guitar and singing, because it's a little bit different than just
you do that
playing,
Yeah, exactly. It's difficult. Singing, so. You do that. And Scott, our guitarist, said, I like you as just the front woman because you get out there in people's faces. And I thought, okay.
Sure. But I'm saying there would be a new dynamic for you. You'd have to literally not really start from square one, but, maybe start from square 6 or 7 or whatever, and try and reach the 10, right? Because it's not that much different, but there's still things that you can't do. There's things that you now can do more of. Now, I'm just kind of curious.
I keep dodging your question. You talk about that year gap. Basically, I got married and had a baby.
Okay.
So
music was kind of out.
Yes.
Okay.
It was. I studied voice for a while, doing more legit voice or pop, whatever you would call it, in college. While I was in college, got married in college, had a baby, and when he was 2, he was diagnosed with autism. So I had an inkling to do band stuff at the time, but I put it on hold and did a focus on that. And I came to realize later that women or men who want to get married and have kids and play music, it is possible to do everything and to get a degree or go back to school and go to grad school and get a degree or whatnot. It is possible to do everything, just not at the same time.
Even with the support system, though? Even with having a family to, support you through it all, it's not a possibility?
It depends on the circumstance. So I did have a very supportive family situation through grad school. I got a master's degree in marketing, an MBA, a master's of business administration with an emphasis in marketing. And I had an extremely strong support system at that time to enable me to focus on studying after my day job, because I had a full-time day job that was 50 hours a week. And then I would study at night and on the weekends. And so having a band on top of that with the marriage and the motherhood, especially with a special needs child, I would have had to stop sleeping, showering, and eating. So it's where you decide how we're going to do this. Okay,
right.
We'll need to put on hold everything that doesn't pertain to basic living.
Do you find that was kind of a benefit to your situation, kind of looking back, because it was kind of the 90s and metal wasn't as cool as what it once became again in the 2000s?
Yes, it was changing. It was grungy, and I liked some of the grunge, and then some of it confused me, or I couldn't understand the lyrics, and that would confuse me because some of the lyrics were rolled out very fast, and I would try singing along, but I had no idea what they were singing or saying. And later I would look at the lyrics and say, wow, that's what they're saying? I had no idea. I still liked the music, but it was something that I just listened to from afar and maybe had a couple of friends who were musicians in college, but it was something I just put on the back burner and didn't even think about. I thought, well, maybe I'll do that again someday. Right now my plate is so full. And I've seen other women talk about this. A cousin of mine got her PhD and she had 2 kids and she thought, I don't know how people do this. She goes, I get it. They just don't do it all at the same time of their life, so that once they turn, let's say 95 on my deathbed, I'm hoping, knock on wood, I can look back and say, look, I've done all these things. I just didn't do it at the same time, but that's okay. I was still able to fit in these bucket list items and balance them, because I did want to be a mother. I did want to be a wife and be able to have that lifestyle that we're kind of brainwashed as women, as girls, the Cinderella complex, to kind of want, because we think that will give us happiness. But we don't know until we live our lives and go through and look back and say, wow, I did get a lot of happiness from those things, even though they ended in divorce. But I also get a lot of happiness and mindfulness from playing live music, because when you're playing live music, you're right then in that moment. Like live theater, you'll never get that moment back, and that magic that you're sharing with the audience, and the excitement and the euphoria, because half the audience is drunk from
Okay.
libations at the bar. The other half maybe not so much, or they can control it, or they're non-drinkers like me. And it's just sharing that. I think one of the reasons why people like to go to bars and listen to music and drink or get stoned is because they're trying to get closer to some type of a spiritual awakening, some type of a higher power. And it opens the mind, and it enables people to do that differently than just going to a 9-to-5 job as an accountant.
Sure.
Or something.
No, I'm kind of curious with you and doing, what do you get more from, what do you get that's different from playing in, say, like a Maiden kind of band, or even just playing a live show compared to like a choir? Like, what is the difference between, what are some of the differences that you get singing in a choir than playing, say, at a rock show?
Damn, that's a really good question. Whew. Good questions. Singing in a choir with 8-part harmony or 4-part harmony, especially doing madrigal classical pieces that are a cappella, I felt a spiritual experience with that, because you or I, anyone who does that, is recreating music that is 100 years old, 200 years old, and we don't have MP3s of these pieces of music from back then, and all those composers are dead. So to recreate that in the spur of the moment, to listen to the ebb and flow of not only the harmonies, but the crescendos, the decrescendos, which are the volume going up and down, and you're doing it live with these human beings that you know and you've been working with. There's an incredible feeling of camaraderie with these human beings, and then you're sharing these sounds with the audience, whoever's there, whether it's a church or a choir competition or just a show for your parents, for your family. It was very special. It did have electrifying feelings to it, and that electrifying feeling is a lot larger in a rock show.
Now, why do you think that is? Just because there's blaring music, coming out of the background, and you have to kind of sing on top of it, rather than you doing an 8-part harmony where you're kind of more in the shuffle of things rather than being out front, I guess, is what I'm saying. Being out front as a singer rather than kind of being a part of something bigger as a singer. If hopefully I'm making sense.
No, you are. It's interesting because for both of them, you could be out front for the choir, if I had a little solo piece, or fronting a band as a singer, being out front. If you've got a good mix and you're on top of the mix, sometimes we're not on top of the mix, and I don't know this until I've seen video, and you realize, wow, I'm right in there. I could have completely screwed the show up and nobody would have known. But in singing as a front woman or front man, there is also some security in knowing, okay, I got a booming bass here. I can feel it in my chest. I can feel the bass vibrations. So can the audience, especially the ones in front of the bass cab. And I can kind of hide in front of that, especially Andy, our drummer, is a big cymbal player.
I've noticed, so yeah.
It's easy to hide behind that and the guitar, and that's where I'll leave it up to the sound guy to mix everything. But there's security in knowing, hey, I'm not going out there bare bones. I'm not singing a cappella. If my voice cracks on a song, I'm going to hear it through my in-ears monitor right as it's cracking. And that will give me the opportunity to change my resonation chamber, or where I am singing that particular note, so that I can immediately fix that and not wait until the audience hears it and then it's like, yikes. And I've done that before, where you first line, first vocal, the voice cracks. It's like, all right, I should have warmed up more. But one of the benefits of the in-ears monitor that I found that really upped my game there is being able to hear my voice in reality in the mix, and knowing what I need to do to change the tonality, the strength of it, whether I'm doing mixed voice or shoving my chest voice up so high that it's going to crack. So
which one do you prefer, I guess, singing wise? Do you prefer being in a, doing it with a choir or doing it with a rock band? And I guess kind of curious what your reasoning for your choice is.
Rock band, because it's easier for my schedule.
Okay.
And it's very electrifying. So the last choir I sang in was in college, and I was in my early 20s. And usually I have a good relationship with the choir director. Some of the choir directors I studied voice from privately, and I loved that, and I would do it again if I had time, could fit it in my schedule. It's extremely rewarding. Anyone who wants to improve their voice and or harmonizing and or reading music, I highly recommend joining a choir. And it helped strengthen my voice immensely for that reason. But what fits with my lifestyle better is bands.
Sure. Now, speaking of bands, I got to ask, the formation of the Iron Maidens, because it's kind of one of the main tribute bands that literally is like world renowned at this point. With Damage Inc. and those kind of tribute bands, and they're few and far between because there's so many tribute bands. But for some reason, those two have put in so much work to where they're world renowned at this point. So I'm just kind of curious how that formation started for you specifically, and kind of, was it whose idea was it at the time when it became the Iron Maidens as a band name too?
Great question. Taking back to some of my blabberings earlier about playing the Gas Lamp, and I love the Gas Lamp as a venue in Long Beach. I was a waitress there in college when I attended Cal State Long Beach. I met my first husband there. And we played a gig there as Wrathchild, and that's when James Moore, Giant Arm, our Dave Murray, said, hey, you guys should fire the men and have all girls, because I would love to see that. And he raised this beer. Great character. And Melanie and I said, we'll look into that. The other two dudes said not so much. So we put some scouts out. It might have been Dennis Resendez, Mosh King, who said, wait a minute, why don't you recruit some of the ladies in Phantom Blue? They've done some albums. They're beyond phenomenal, and they may be available. They may have some time. And I think he was the hookup for that. And we hooked up with them, and we had a meeting with them at the Gas Lamp. And we sat at booth number 3. And the booth is still there. I love that. I sang at an anniversary, the 18th year, and I said that booth right there was where we sat down and decided we're going to do this. And so we had Linda and Josephine on one side of the table, and Melanie and I on the other side of the table, and we talked it through, and we talked about goals and background and what we were looking to do, and there was just a nice synergy between us. And so we said, well, let's give it a shot. And we have to come up with a name. And we thought about it for a couple of weeks and thought of Iron Maidens. And someone said, well, why not the Iron Maidens? And I don't remember who came up with either of those, but the Iron Maidens sounds like it would differentiate the band more than just Iron Maidens, which is very close to Iron Maiden. So we selected that. Melanie designed the first logo, added the S, added the THE. She came up with the yellow Eddie Pac-Man face with a bow and the eyelashes that later I spray painted onto some black pieces of fabric, and we put that there as amp covers and sprinkled glitter all over the garage to add a little glitz to it, because I always wanted to add that feminine side to Maiden, because I hear their music as feminine. Maybe it's that progressive metal, progressive rock sound that they have, but it's that tone that Dave Murray has as well, that very round tone that's just so fluid. So that was
okay. And going off of into the, I'm going to now shift my focus into the Iron Maidens kind of story in your career here, and just ask, because I never got to see you with the Iron Maidens. I got to see what they are now, and I'm just kind of curious if you were doing more of the Di'Anno thing, and because obviously now there's quote unquote Bruce, right?
Right.
But I'm just kind of curious, were you more focused on the Di'Anno era, or just all of Bruce Dickinson and kind of nothing else?
At the time, we only had 2 or 3 Paul Di'Anno songs, and we started to I added a couple more to my repertoire. My comfort zone was Dickinson.
Okay.
And that being said, I had an alter ego, Paulina Di'Anno, when I would do those songs. And the black leather and his whole persona was so different than Bruce. And he was more of the bad boy, the outrageous drunk / artist, and had the inner demons. And I loved reading his autobiography, or maybe it was a biography. I think it was an autobiography. He may have had a ghostwriter with it.
Sure. Really
eye-opening about his journey and what he went through and his demons with that band, and his whole take on it was, I'm more of a punk rocker living life on the edge. And where he clashed with Steve Harris was that Steve looked at it as a business, which he had to. If he hadn't looked at it as a business, it would not have, they wouldn't be where they were today.
Sure.
Brilliant businessman. And so I know they clashed over that. But yes, I did Di'Anno more to round out our set. And I especially loved the Killers album.
Okay. See, I'm more of a Blaze fan than a Di'Anno fan, so that's where I differentiate in Iron Maiden. Yeah. So,
Blaze is a great singer.
His solo stuff is fucking incredible.
He's phenomenal. He got a lot of flack singing for Maiden,
but I blame Steve Harris because of the songwriting. Yeah. I think when you have a singer like a Blaze Bayley, you got to write for him.
Yes.
Even if you put Di'Anno singing "Number of the Beast," that would have sounded horrible. No offense. It just I don't.
He would have yelled half of it. So
sure,
because he's a punk guy, so it's a lot of yelling tones.
Right, and that's why the 2 Maiden albums kind of fit his vocal style.
Exactly.
Right. So if you gave him Revelations to sing on, it would have sounded like shit.
Exactly.
In my opinion, I'm just speaking for me only, but
right for your singer.
Correct, and I feel like with the Blaze era, he got the shit end of the stick because Steve was kind of, his dad had died during that era, and he was writing more progressive stuff, and Blaze is just not that kind of a singer, right?
And plus, their marketing possibly could have been better, but I'm not going to judge it. I mean, I'm a marketing person, so I'm always looking at what bands do from a PR standpoint. And anytime you step into somebody's shoes like a Bruce Dickinson, like a Rob Halford, like a Vince Neil, the fans aren't going to like it. And the fans aren't going to understand why. They just want what they're used to. So it's incumbent upon that band to work as a unit and say, okay, how can we work together to turn out something new and so mind-blowing that this new singer will be accepted and not just thrown under the bus? Like John Corabi, great singer. They weren't going to accept him because they wanted Vince Neil, even though John Corabi's pitch is much better than Vince Neil's.
And he's also not a piece of shit like Vince Neil. But
that's another
that's another story, right? But even Brian Johnson and Bon Scott, I mean, it's again that it fit the style. So I'm just saying with you specifically, I guess you focus more on encompassing both kind of aspects, and it's just really interesting to see what they've become nowadays compared to then. So I guess in your opinion, starting out, what is the main difference between then and what they kind of became?
Oh, the Maidens?
Yes.
Oh, the musicianship over time is much. They're tight. They're fast. Okay, so not to say that the original lineup were not tight. We had phenomenal musicians, but we were only 1, 2, 3 years in before I stepped down. So we were as good as we could have been with rehearsing once a week and being in our 20s to where they are now, which is a finely honed machine, and they've gotten everything fine-tuned, not only so they are tight, their tempo has sped up. And I know this because I sat in, I think it was 2014, 2012, maybe 2014. I sat in with them on The Trooper, playing at a club in Corona, and Jack Lew was there and captured it. And it's great because I have like short brown hair, a Karen haircut, a short Karen haircut with dark brown. I look like a soccer mom. And I showed up because they said, hey, come out and just sing The Trooper, sing a song. And I thought, okay, what the hell? I'm not rehearsed. I haven't sung this in forever. Well, what the hell? So I show up, and Linda said, I didn't know what to expect. She said, I was expecting all the metal and this and that. And I just walk in like, hi, I'm a soccer mom. I'm going to sing The Trooper in jeans. But it was fun. It was great. And I went up, I sang the tune. I remember all the words, thank God, because that's brutal. If you mess up one word for a tribute band, they'll skin you alive. It's a lot of pressure. It's much less pressure doing my original songs with Subsurface Tension. Sang the song, came back out, and I told Linda's husband, OMG, the tempo is way faster than what we played back when. And that makes sense because we all had just a couple dozen gigs under our belt and learning and still getting our gear dialed in, and before any endorsing situations, and yeah, they're a finely well-oiled machine. And when I sat in with them for the 18-year anniversary at the Gas Lamp again, that was special. I got to see even more so how they had evolved. They all have their own in-ear monitors with each separate in-ear box, and then it's all managed by the side-of-house guy who's got it all on an iPad. Very professional, the way a professional band does it, and dialing everybody in so that during any part of any song, Courtney can just look over and say, I need more of this, I need more of that. And it's super efficient.
Absolutely. Now, when did the decision for you to kind of step out of the Iron Maidens come into play?
It was one of our tours was very difficult. So we were set to leave the day after Thanksgiving, and I was a young married woman.
And what year are we talking, if you don't mind?
Maybe 2003.
Okay.
2002, 2003, somewhere within that realm. So maybe it was, I'm so bad with dates. Maybe it was Thanksgiving in 2002. So leaving to go on a 2-week tour on the East Coast, it was cold. And there was an altercation in my home because my husband at the time did not want me to be touring or to leave to go do that kind of stuff. So there was an altercation, and I went on the tour, and we got to play for amazing people, amazing towns, amazing crowds. What an experience. I got to meet some other rock stars and even jam with some of them. It was great. And came back from that and had to reassess my life and what was important in my life, my child, my husband at the time, the band, and kind of make some hard decisions on where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do. I used to work in the computer industry and the .com bubble was bursting or had burst, and there was a chunk of time where I was out of work, and back then the type of money we were making for the Maidens would not support a family or support half a family, and that's fine. It was a hobby band for fun, and for me it was a joy. I wasn't doing it for money, and I think that's part of why we became successful, was it was in our hearts. We weren't just doing this saying, hey, we won't play here for free. Here's our minimum. I mean, we eventually built up our guarantee, but at first it was like, we're playing for the joy of this. And if we have to play for free in these new towns to convince the bookers and promoters and venue owners that, yes, we can draw 100 people, yes, we can, we would do it. No question.
Absolutely. And I got to ask, before I get into like the original projects that you were in, I have to ask the differences in what you get as far as a feeling goes when performing original music compared to, say, in a tribute band.
Much less pressure for original music. Partially it's because I helped write the songs. I write the lyrics and the melody lines for all the Subsurface songs. And so they're in there in the subconscious. Also, they're mine. So if I decide to go out and sing the first verse twice, then I'm going to go out and I'm going to sing the first verse twice. If I'm going to change the melody on this part, no problem. If I sneeze during some of the words, oh well.
Let me branch off this point.
Sure.
If I'm going to hypothetically say this, let's say Subsurface Tension is as big as Iron Maiden, though, and your songs are well known like Iron Maiden. What is the pressure going to be if you're singing the same verse twice? I mean, it's essentially kind of the same thing, don't you think?
Yes and no. So I've heard Bruce do this on some of his live tracks where he'll go in and he'll change the melody and he'll flip around, like Ace is High, he's done. He'll flip around the words. And if you're a diehard, you'll say, well, that's different than the studio recording. It's like, well, it's Bruce Dickinson. He's going to do whatever the hell he wants. But also after that time, Bruce has toured a gazillion shows. And so they're in his brain, and if he wants to flip it or doesn't want to flip it, he's probably like, who cares? Nobody's going to care.
Sure.
So, sure, that would be great if we ever got that big. And thank you for even suggesting such a thing. That's very flattering. But it's a lot more pressure to do a tribute band and to do it right. And let me tell you, going in and just singing one song with the Iron Maidens as a guest, I'm 10 times more nervous than if I just go play with Subsurface Tension and we just go do a show.
Maybe it has something to do with because you wrote the song, so you can have more kind of leeway in kind of flubbing them.
Right. And
because you kind of wrote them already, so maybe there's some kind of that in there. But so what made you kind of start an original project after getting your life back together?
That was always my bucket list. My ex-husband, who fronted Creeping Death, tribute to Metallica, but they only played the old school stuff, and they were starting to retire right when Damage Inc. was coming up. And it was great because at that time, Metallica was coming out with new material, and they didn't want to play it, and the crowd would ask for it, and they'd say flat out, go see Damage Inc. They play that. They would plug Damage Inc. and say, go see them. They play all eras of Metallica, and it's funny because Damage Inc. has two brothers in it, and so did Creeping Death, the front man and the bassist, and they both had that similar thing. And I thought that's such a cool coincidence. But your question was, what was it again?
When you got your life back together, why an original band?
Bucket list, right?
Bucket list,
Sorry,
yeah.
Early onset Alzheimer's here, knock on wood, I hope not. It was always my bucket list. And my ex-husband, who fronted Creeping Death, had an original metal project, and he was a great songwriter, and he could write very easily. And I always envied that, and I thought, man, I want to be able to write like that. And I thought, well, maybe I could take those songs and I could sing them, but it won't be the same, And I didn't have confidence with my writing. And even with starting this stuff, I'd say to him, hey, can you help me write this stuff? And he's like, you don't need me. You can write your own stuff, But I needed that confidence and to actually try. And so I eventually did. getting some bare bones guitar parts from my guys, taking that and working with it to the point now where we have a formula that works, and each song we writes more easily, kind of writes itself following this formula. But just bucket list. I wanted to be able to be a songwriter, be a singer-songwriter, because I didn't feel legit just doing covers. Not that there's anything wrong with a cover band. I have a side cover band, which helps my chops. It helps my stage presence. But there was just something more to that. Almost like, oh, I'm a legit songwriter now if I can write something.
But did you also kind of want to have kind of like a legacy recorded? Because, I mean, it's hard to just record a tribute band kind of album or whatnot. So I'm just kind of curious if that played some sort of part in it for you.
A bucket list is to record and finish an album, like one whole album, vinyl, not vinyl. Jeff Fonstock always wants vinyl from me, even if it costs $5,000 and I only sell two vinyls. Yeah, that's a bucket list of mine.
Okay, so there's certain goals obviously within this one bucket list, kind of thing for starting an original band, right? So I'm going off of this point. When did Surface Tension, I have to say Surface Tension, kind of form? And was this the first original band after the Iron Maidens that started?
Good question. So it was my second original band after the Iron Maidens. I had been working in the corporate world, doing the mom thing, doing the wife thing, and said I was divorced at this time. And I started getting antsy. And so I had left behind a lot of my old musical contacts, musical friends, and I just started looking on Craigslist for bands needing a singer. It's much easier to just slip in and try to put something together with people who don't know each other. There's not much glue there. It helps if you have people with a history. So I found a few bands. I auditioned for one or two, and I found a band called Neighborhood X, and it was a punk and metal band, cover and original band. So it was really great training for me to get back into it, getting used to what new gear was out now. And it had been 13 years, and a lot of the scar tissue I had built up around my larynx and vocal cords was gone. And I had to build that back up. And those 8 months with those guys, I'll always be grateful for, even though we only had 2 gigs. It was super fun, and they were very patient with me because I was doing a lot of screaming and vibrato and Bruce Dickinson's sound, and the drummer, who was punk-based, worked with me and said, come over to my house. I'm just going to play a bunch of punk records. I want you to listen to these vocalists and what they do. They don't hold notes. They don't have vibrato. They yell it out. It's like, here's the Sex Pistols. We covered the Sex Pistols. And I thought, okay, great. I never had a Sex Pistols album. I've never listened to this stuff. So it was really eye-opening to me. And I thought, I do have a lot of vibrato. I need to pull that way back. This is not Cats on frickin' Broadway. I sound like a karaoke singer, so got to pull it way back. And so that was really eye-opening for me. It was really helpful, and playing those gigs was different, very different than playing with the Maidens. I thought, oh, stage presence, I got this. Go up on stage in a little tutu and some crazy clothes, and then looking back, I realized I don't have great stage presence. I'm remembering what I thought I had. This is nothing like what I was doing back then. And kind of had to rebuild that and say, I'm not Bruce Dickinson anymore. Who am I? I need to come up with my own sound, my own resonation, my own stage moves, and kind of evolve into my next band, which was Surface Tension.
Do you think that was a bigger success, though, for you personally, than just maybe staying in the Iron Maidens and seeing what they became? Because I feel it would be a more, I don't know, I would much rather succeed at or fail at something original than kind of succeed at something that somebody else has already done. So I'm just kind of curious, was that the same feeling for you personally?
For the Neighborhood X band?
Sure, or just even kind of branching out on your own for an original project rather than sticking in a tribute band.
I did feel like it was a magical door opening for me, even though we might play the Doll Hut for 4 people, and those 4 people are the door guy, the sound guy, the bartender, and my boyfriend, Junkman from KNAC.
Sure.
And so it was humbling, but also I had to learn and come face to face with the fact that if people don't know the music, they may not want to come out. You can market the hell out of it. And if they don't know the music and you don't have the relationships, sometimes it's the relationships with the local community to get them to come out. But it was just so exciting to play original music. And after I had performed original music for the first time, I just got all shivery and thought, oh my God, I just performed original music. This is amazing, because that had been on my bucket list for so many years.
But even, did you have a record out around this time with Neighborhood X, or were you just kind of a demo at least? I mean, how do you get people out if you don't even have like a demo or something to kind of say, hey, this is what we sound like?
Good question. Those guys were much younger than me, and they knew the whole social media thing, which I was just starting to dip my feet into that. I didn't really know about it. And so they would promote through social media, and I'd make stupid mistakes. Like I would create 5 different invites on Facebook, and they'd go, why did you do that? And I'd say, well, because I wanted each invite to have each of these 5 different pictures, because we went to all the trouble to have these pictures done, and I wanted these 5 different flyers. He goes, you can just like change the picture every week or every day on Facebook, right? And I said, nope, didn't know that. And they go, you can schedule your posts so that you can just have it pop every 24 hours if you want to, right? Didn't you know that? Nope, didn't know that. So they helped teach me, because two of them were millennials, and I'm this old lady, and so just learning and just said, okay, I'm learning. It's all good.
Okay, and going off, we established kind of the Neighborhood X thing and transitioning into Surface Tension. How did you find Scott and the guys?
Good question. So my ex-husband, Bill Warren, who fronted Creeping Death, his buddy, Joe, played guitar with Andy, or knew Andy forever. They come from the same neighborhood. Andy's a drummer. And so Bill and Joe played a couple of gigs with them under their old name. And Bill sang and Joe played guitar. And then for a while, Joe sang and decided, I've got these other music projects. I don't have time for this. But they're all great guys. And he said, I don't want to leave them high and dry. Who do we know who could be a singer for this type of metal? It's old school metal. I've been told Old Maiden, Merciful Fate, you guys sound like. And so Bill said, well, Jen, that's a no-brainer. This music is exactly her style. So he had Joe text me, and it was right at that weekend that Neighborhood X had split because our guitarist was getting married and going to have a baby.
And what year are we talking?
Oh, God. I don't know. Well, I've been with them for almost 4 years. So 4 years. Yeah. Something like that.
So around 2016, 2017, you got the phone call?
Yeah, I think it was 2017. And Joe said, hey, this band needs a singer. You'd be a good fit. Then I said, perfect. My other band just disbanded. And met them, got together. They played their songs. I had very little prep. I just tried to come up with something on the spur of the moment so they could get my vibe. They could see me. I could see them over in Santa Fe Springs at Holloway. And it clicked. So right then Andy goes, well, do you want to play a gig in 3 weeks at the Doll Hut? And I said, what? Okay. I'm going to learn this songs here.
What impressed you about their originals, though, to join them, to say yes to joining them?
Well, Andy on drums is the backbone of the band. He has the personality of a magnet. He's a healer. He has the energy of 3 guys half his age. He's the backbone first. And then Scott is just a big, lovable, hilarious guy. Has very dry humor that I get. And that was great. Humor's a must. And then Freddie is an old soul. You look into his eyes and there are many lifetimes there. I just felt very comfortable with them. And also they have the glue. So they had been together for 3 years doing that project. And then Andy and Scott knew each other decades ago. Anytime you have glue like that, you increase the chance of your band staying together, whether it's taking 2 people from this band and 3 people from that band. You put that glue together, it helps when maybe tempers flare. It's like, oh, he's just doing his thing. That's fine.
What did you bring differently to Surface Tension than what they had kind of prior to you, besides your marketing and your vocal style?
Good question. I met a couple of their singers that they've had a few singers over the years. Well, let's see. Marketing, vocal style, zaniness, crazy sense of humor. Everybody tells me I'm crazy constantly in a good way. The men in the white coats haven't come yet.
But I'm saying, like, I guess what I'm going with this too, did you bring in more contacts for them? Did you get them in a recording studio, say than what they couldn't at before you, or want to record a record and you knew how to do that at that point and maybe they didn't, or did you bring any of that to the table?
Good question. What intangibles did I bring to the table? Well, marketing and singing were my strengths.
Sure,
definitely.
Sure.
Beyond that, they had recorded a demo and it was awaiting vocals. And I thought, well, let me just slap some vocals on this. And they said, nope, let's do it right. Let's start over. Let's record somewhere else. And so we recorded a demo at OC Sound Studios that Freddie owns. Freddie's a bass player. And they have great capability there because they have a studio for people who want to do their own podcast, who don't know how to set it up, or they just want to go there to record the podcast. There's a producer there for that. They do demos. They do record recording there. They also have hourly studios and lockouts. It's like a one-stop shop for a lot of stuff. And they're great guys, Freddie and Phil, running that place. So we did a demo, and then we started doing recording with Nico from Scars on Broadway. Thank you. And he was really great at pulling my vocals out, at getting what I needed to do down. And that was great. Yanni did the tech stuff, and he was great too. It's not always easy. I mentioned this on our last interview, to get metal out of women. It's just weird. It's odd. And sometimes the recording engineer has a little trepidation about how to approach that, whether to say, okay, let's do the bubblegum metal, or no, I want you to go in there and sing that as if your boyfriend just stabbed you to death and killed you, and have anger, and playing off these different emotions. And then once you're getting those layered, figuring out where to push and pull on these different things so that you have a softness, and then you also have the toughness.
So dynamics.
Right. And not all engineers are comfortable with that or want to deal with that. Some want that. They say, this is an intriguing challenge to me. Let me try to get into that. So I didn't have a lot of experience recording. I did some recording with the church, which I kind of didn't count because it was my voice blended with others. It was more to just see how a major studio works, and how to work with other people and listen to the monitors and blend. And the other experience, I had recording a little bit with the Iron Maidens before I stepped down. And that partially impacted my decision to step down, because I thought, I don't want to waste these people's time and money. If I'm going to step down, the new girl really needs to be on that record. But at least I think I recorded Phantom of the Opera with them. And so that was a good experience too. I got to work with an engineer who was not familiar with Maiden, was not familiar with Maiden vocals, had never heard Bruce Dickinson in his life, trying to tell me what to sing and what not to sing, and what to do and what not to do, and what to do with my vibrato, when he knew nothing about Maiden. In hindsight, I was in my 20s. In hindsight, how I would have handled that differently is probably to say, well, thank you. You've been great, and I know you're in our budget. Our budget was very low. to record the instruments. The instruments sounded great, but for Maiden vocals, I really need to find an engineer and or producer who's very familiar with Maiden, someone who had covered Maiden before, and actually had someone, but it was too late at that point. I needed to step down. But in hindsight, if the universe was different, I would have done my vocals with a Maiden person to then have it added and mastered.
So going off of this, I know you had done Death Wish. You had recorded Death Wish, and I'm just kind of curious, with that whole kind of experience, how you applied it onto, say, that specific recording, and how you're going to apply it to future recordings.
Good question. I added a little bit of like girl softness to that, but also I added grit, which I do a lot, probably too much. I'm trying to pull back from that. As well as I learned a little bit of Fry's screaming technique, which I used a little bit on that track. And I never would have been able to add that type of dynamic back when I was with the Maidens if I had tried to do an original project at that time, because that type of music just hadn't hit the mainstream yet. And after all this time, I had been influenced by Pantera, by Randy Blythe with Lamb of God, and by looking at how that was achieved, what was going on with the throat, the physiology of the voice, and then looking at Randy Blythe's vocal coach, who has that...
the Zen of Screaming?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And we got that. I looked at that, popped in the CD, practiced to that, and it had me look at an entirely new way of doing vocals, which I'm sure you've studied the hell out of that. Your vocal style is utilizing those techniques. And so I tried to draw from those. I want to use those more than my bandmates might want me to, because they want to keep it more melodic. But yet I love that edgy, dark piece, and trying to balance that and still be feminine.
Well, but you have to have, it depends on the style of music you're playing too. So the guys have to kind of write for that kind of style, right? If you're playing melodic, chances are you're going to have more space in the actual song itself or the overall sound. If you're just doing kind of like what Madras is doing, we don't have a lot of space. It's literally just kind of get up and go, like, just straight up adrenaline. So you kind of have to pick your poison and kind of influence it in a way that's gonna work with whatever vocal style you want to do, right? With anything,
right?
Now I have to ask you, what is going on with the Subsurface Tension now, because you had to change the name due to having 10 other
surface tensions.
It's
very common, right?
Yeah, right. So I'm just kind of curious what Subsurface Tension is kind of up to now, and can we expect a full-length record, hopefully relatively soon?
We will, or I will die doing it. It is a bucket list, and it is going, but we're self-funding, so we're going as we can, and we are adding more songs. And that's what's getting exciting about the songs we're adding, because the songs Scott and I write together that we start, and then we all pitch in, so we all have writing credit on all the songs. So Scott is a very old school Metallica vibe with what we put together. Freddie, on the other hand, is Middle Eastern, and he's also in a punk band called The Hajj with his brother Phil. And what he writes is very fun, punky, different tempo, a lot of breaks, and we've started writing together as well, and those songs have a different vibe, but they've woven into our set, so they all kind of come together somehow. They're very peppy. But yes, we will. And sometimes because we all have day jobs and we all self-fund, and we set aside cash for recording time, and we kind of have to self-motivate each other for that. But yes, we've written a chunk of more songs, so it's like, dudes, we've got to get down and do it.
I mean, somebody's going to have to whip you guys into shape to do it, and so you can keep kind of not having to take, say, 10 years to make another record, right? Because a lot of bands suffer from that. They need that motivation. They need the bad guy, as I call us. You know, you have to have it, unfortunately.
And independent record companies don't want to touch you if you're not motivated to finish something in 8 months or less. They don't. They want to see self-motivation. Like Huntress, they got signed after they did an album or two, and then they self-funded this kick-ass video, and then they shopped it around, and they got picked up because it kicked ass, and plus they sounded phenomenal.
Sure, and a huge rest in peace to Joe. Now let's go before we get out of here. I want to thank you again for coming on and hanging and telling your story and whatnot. And I'm just kind of curious where people can find anything Jen Warren related, Subsurface Tension, anything. So what are your links?
Sure. We are at subsurfacetension.com for our .com, and we're probably mostly on Facebook with our events and our updates. We also have Surface Tension Metal on Instagram and Twitter. And I would like to take this opportunity to plug our merch, which is on Teespring, which is now rebranded to be Spring. And our other projects. We have a side heavy metal project called Tits McGee and the Porch Pirates. And Junkman actually came up with the name. And we play fun covers, bands we like King Diamond and Grim Reaper and Judas Priest and the Runaways, Doro, stuff like that. And it's just fun. We dress like pirates, and we've got a treasure chest. I throw chocolate coins out to the audience. It's a great time. And so our other projects are called Our Dying World and Thrown into Exile. That's our new guitar player, Tom. He's got 2 projects, and the music is really heavy. We're really blessed to have him on guitar. Freddie has the Hajj, and that's it. We were asked to be on Hood's Got Talent 2.
Oh, right on, with Diego?
Yes.
From MX Machine?
Yes, Diego Negretti.
Candle Power Records as well.
Candle Power Record. You're good.
Well, we were on part 1.
There you go. We're hoping to put Death Wish on that. We have another single that we've been like timing to release, and it's like, let's just release it.
That's good people to know. Big shout out to Diego who's watching and listening. So
yeah, he's done a lot of stuff. And also just shout out to OC Sound Studios, where we have our lockout. They've been so good to us, and they lock out a bunch of other great bands like Elvis Simmons and the Memphis Strutters, so friends of ours. They're also a theme band. They play metal covers. They also play Elvis, but they have a lot of fun. And I'm seeing more bands like this that are branching out from the tribute and cover band, just saying, let's play cover music, but let's have fun with it. Let's be characters. And that brings me back to my roots of theater, where you bring on other troupe players, backup vocalists, lead vocalists, jump in, characters, add some comedy in between, because it's all about entertainment and filling the clubs and keeping those venue owners happy by having people come, order food, order drinks, because if we are not doing that as performers, we're not doing our job. So that's it.
Miss Jen, thank you so much again for coming on the show and hanging. I really do appreciate it. Another episode of Poppitt's Corner, guys. I'm out. Cheers.